Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're far from comfort, deep in the frozen frontier of the Soviet Union, where the wind drags across barbed wire and the snow settles over a labour camp carved into the wilderness. You're not an officer or a supervisor, just a prisoner worker moving through the cold machinery of another assigned day. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. The final stretch of the journey feels less like travel and more like an administrative delay. You sit on a wooden bench that has already moulded itself to countless bodies before yours, each one carried deeper into distances that seem designed to erase the concept of return. The air inside the transport wagon is stale and unmoving, as if even the cold outside has decided not to bother entering. You wrap your arms around yourself, though there is little warmth left to preserve. The floor trembles beneath you with each mechanical groan of the wheels, and you feel the vibration climb your bones, as if the journey is trying to leave an imprint inside you. You shift slightly, careful not to draw attention, though attention is a rare currency here. Most faces around you remain still, half-shadowed, half-remembered. You don't know their names, and they don't know yours. The silence is not mutual respect. It is the efficient quiet of people who understand that noise is pointless. Outside, the wind presses against the wagon's walls with a faint, steady pressure, like the weight of a stamp sealing an envelope. You breathe slowly, each breath a small act of endurance. When the wagon begins to lose speed, you feel it before you hear it. The shuddering grows uneven, the wheels scraping against metal rails with a dragging reluctance. You sense the deceleration in your shoulders, in the way your body leans forward by instinct. Someone near you lifts their head, not out of curiosity, but out of the simple awareness that the movement has changed. The guards at the far end straighten, their boots loud against the floorboards. The metal of their rifles glints in the weak lantern light, a reminder that your future has already been decided. The brakes complain in a long stretching whine, and the wagon finally settles into stillness. It is not a peaceful stillness. It feels closer to a page being turned in a file you never asked to be part of. A moment later, the door slides open with a heavy, reluctant clatter. A gust of air rushes in, cold enough to make your lungs tighten. It smells of iron, pine, and something faintly chemical, as if the land itself has been cleaned and catalogued. A guard gestures sharply for everyone to rise. You stand, your legs stiff from the hours, perhaps days it's hard to track, of confinement. The first step forward aches, but you take it because movement is no longer a choice. You shuffle toward the opening, your hands numb, your breath rising in pale strands. The threshold feels like the border between one kind of uncertainty and another. When your boots touch the packed snow outside, the cold enters you with surprising precision. It slides into the seams of your clothes, needles your skin, and lingers as if checking for proper authorization. The landscape stretches out in muted shades of white and grey, each layer flattened beneath the weight of winter. Nothing seems urgent here. Even the wind moves with the slow discipline of paperwork being pushed from one desk to another. You take a moment to look around, though there is little comfort in what you see. Wooden watchtowers stand like formal signatures against the sky, their shapes rigid and unavoidable. Barbed wire coils lazily along the perimeter, sagging slightly under frost, as if it has been here longer than memory. The buildings in the distance blend with the snow, low uniform structures arranged in rows that feel less like architecture and more like instructions followed without emotion. A guard behind you gives a short command, not loud, just enough to herd you forward. His voice lacks hostility. It is the sound of a task repeated so often that the words have worn smooth. You join the slow procession of bodies, each moving with the subdued momentum of someone who understands that hesitation is an unnecessary detail. Footprints from previous arrivals form faint depressions in the snow, guiding your steps even before you consider where you're heading. The cold deepens as you walk. It pushes against your chest in steady pulses, and your breath feels heavier each time you release it. The distant chimneys exhale thin trails of smoke that drift across the sky like annotations on an unread manuscript. The place seems to function without urgency or warmth, kept alive by routine alone. You feel as though you've entered a system too vast to resist, one that operates with the quiet certainty of machinery designed to outlast individual lives. A guard redirects the group toward a wooden platform. As you step closer, you notice the cracks in the planks, darkened by years of weather and footsteps. Snow has settled into the gaps, like dust gathering between the pages of a long-neglected archive. You stand there with the others, the wind nipping at your ears, while another guard begins reading names from a clipboard. His voice is steady, detached, as though he is reciting inventory rather than identifying human beings. When your name is called, it sounds unfamiliar, as if it belongs to someone else. You answer quietly, and the guard checks your presence with a quick stroke of his pen. That single motion feels heavier than it should, an official mark that confirms your entry into a place that does not need your story, only your labour. You follow the next wave of instructions without question. The path leads you past a frozen clearing where the snow lies untouched except for a few scattered boot marks. The trees at the edge of the camp stand thin and brittle, their branches bare as though stripped down to their most functional form. They offer no shade, no shelter, merely the visual reminder that life continues even in the most indifferent conditions. A faint hum reaches you from somewhere deeper in the camp. Machinery perhaps, or generators, or something older and more primitive. The sound is steady, persistent, like the rhythmic pulse of an institution that doesn't sleep. You walk beside others who keep their heads low, their movements guided by resignation rather than fear. There is a certain relief in that clarity. You no longer need to decide where to go or what to do. The place decides for you. The ground becomes uneven, and you feel the crunch of ice beneath your boots. Each step presses into the earth with a dull finality. As you approach another row of structures, you notice how identical they look. Their roofs sag slightly under the weight of frost, and their walls have the faded colour of wood that has surrendered to time. Smoke drifts lazily from a few chimneys, but the air around you remains sharp and unforgiving. A guard leads you into a small building near the edge of the row. The interior is dim, lit by a single lamp hanging from a wire. The light flickers occasionally, casting long shadows across the floor. A desk sits at the far end, cluttered with papers, stamps, and metal forms. The man behind it barely looks up. His face is expressionless, the lines on his skin arranged with the precision of a man whose emotions have been systematically filed away. You step forward when instructed, placing your hands on the desk. Your fingers tremble slightly, though from cold or exhaustion, you cannot tell. The man records information in a logbook, his pen moving with mechanical regularity. He asks you a series of questions. Your name, your birthplace, your supposed offence. His voice never changes. When he stamps the final page, the sound is loud in the quiet room, a sharp confirmation that you have been officially absorbed into the structure around you. He hands you a small card, with your number printed in black ink. The edges are sharp and clean, as though recently cut. You slip it into your pocket, feeling its weight settle against your leg. The number feels more permanent than anything else you carry. You are shown out of the building and back into the cold. The sky above has shifted slightly, the pale light dimming as the day drifts toward evening. The camp seems to breathe in slow, steady intervals, each building exhaling faint trails of smoke that disappear almost as soon as they form. You walk along the path, your feet sinking slightly into the snow, guided not by understanding, but by the quiet inevitability of the place. Ahead, the barracks wait, low, narrow structures that blend into the white landscape like another row of storage units. You sense that once you enter, the shape of your days will rearrange themselves around routines older than you, routines that have worn down countless others. The cold tightens around your fingers, and you curl them into your palms, trying to feel something familiar. You take a slow breath, watching it drift into the air and dissolve. The guards stand nearby, their rifles resting easily against their shoulders. Their eyes slide over you without stopping, as though confirming the presence of yet another item on a list. You step forward, the barracks drawing closer. The wind stings your cheeks, and the camp settles into a quiet that feels both heavy and procedural. You continue walking, guided by the faint crunch of your own footsteps and the quiet certainty that nothing you do now belongs entirely to you. The door ahead waits, its hinges stiff with frost, its wood worn smooth by hands and winters long forgotten. You reach it just as the last of the daylight fades, and the cold presses deeper into your bones, as if reminding you of the new reality you have entered. You push the door open. The air inside the barracks settles around you like a thin, reluctant blanket. The wood smells of old sweat and damp earth, as if the walls themselves have absorbed the breath of every person who has slept here. You stand still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the dim interior. The narrow rows of bunks stretch ahead, each one nearly identical, each one bearing the faint indentation of someone who once lay there long enough to leave a mark. A guard steps inside behind you, the hinges groaning as he pushes the door with the heel of his glove. He doesn't speak, he merely gestures toward a bench near the far wall. You follow the direction, the floorboards creaking under your weight. The other prisoners glance at you briefly, not out of curiosity, but out of a quiet calculation. The small, fleeting recognition of one more body added to the system that surrounds you all. On the bench, a stack of forms waits. They rest in uneven piles, some curling at the corners, others marked with stains that obscure the edges of their printed lines. Beside them sits a lantern, its flame small but steady, casting a narrow cone of light across the desk. In that glow, you can see the ink bottles, the wooden stamps, the rows of cards with numbers written in thick, careful strokes. Nothing here is personal. Everything is categorization. A man sits behind the desk, his posture straight but weary. His uniform is buttoned with meticulous precision, though the fabric near the elbows has begun to fray. His face is pale, his lips a thin line drawn across years of mechanical duty. When he lifts his gaze, he does not look at you. He looks through you, as if reading information only he can see. He points to the stool in front of him. You sit, feeling its cold surface through your coat. The lantern flickers slightly as he moves, illuminating his hands. Thin, steady, unhesitating. He pulls a ledger from the stack. The cover is cracked, the spine worn, the pages thick from constant handling. He opens it to a section marked by a strip of cloth, and the sound of paper sliding against paper is faint but precise, like the gentle ticking of a clock. He begins. Your name is spoken with no rise or fall in tone. He writes it down in a neat block of letters, leaving just enough space between each character to ensure legibility. Then he asks for the year you were born. Your voice sounds muted in the quiet room, but he doesn't seem to hear anything beyond the answer. His pen scratches the paper, steady and unbroken. Every fact about you, your age, your occupation, your supposed offence, becomes ink that binds you more firmly than any chain could. There is a strange emptiness in the way he asks his questions. Each one is a box that needs to be filled, nothing more. You can feel your history shrinking with each scribbled note, condensed into a format someone else designed. The small details that once made you who you were, your habits, your mistakes, your hopes, have no place in his forms. They are excess noise, irrelevant to the system now taking shape around you. He reaches for a small wooden stamp. You hear the soft thud of it tapping against the ink pad, then the louder, more decisive thump as it lands on the form in front of you. The sound echoes slightly in the room, a sharp punctuation in an otherwise quiet space. The mark it leaves is dark and absolute. You feel the finality of it settle into your chest. He turns the page, another form, another series of questions, another set of blank lines, waiting for answers that no longer feel like yours. Your voice grows soft as you respond, more out of exhaustion than fear. The cold from outside still clings to your clothes, creeping up your sleeves and collecting in your fingertips. You rub your hands together, trying to bring warmth back into them, but the air remains stubbornly indifferent. When he finishes recording your information, he pushes the forms aside and reaches for a narrow metal drawer built into the desk. It slides open with a metallic rasp. Inside lie rows of cards, each one with a number printed at the top. He flips through them with practiced movements, stopping only when he finds a blank one. He takes it out carefully, as though it holds more significance than your name ever did. He writes a number on the card in bold, unhurried strokes. The ink dries quickly on the coarse surface. Then he stamps it, the seal landing squarely in the centre. He holds the card up to the light for a moment, examining it the way a quality inspector might review a finished part. Satisfied, he sets it on the desk in front of you. "Memorize it," he murmurs, his voice flat and soft. You look at the numbers, their shapes dark and rigid. They feel foreign, yet they settle into your mind with surprising ease, as if claiming space that your memories have already begun to vacate. The man nods once when you repeat the sequence, then gestures for you to slip the card into your pocket. Your fingers grip it lightly, the edges pressing into your skin with quiet authority. He opens another drawer and retrieves a thin folder. The paper inside smells faintly of dust and old ink. You watch as he places the completed forms into the folder, aligning them with meticulous precision. He smooths the top page once with the side of his hand, then ties the folder shut with a length of frayed twine. When he writes your assigned number across the front, it becomes clear that the folder is not meant to represent you, it is meant to replace you. The guard at the door shifts his weight, the wooden floor creaking under his boot. The man behind the desk stands, picks up the folder, and hands it to the guard without ceremony. The transfer is efficient, impersonal, and practiced. The guard tucks the folder under his arm and waits, watching you with the blank steadiness of someone who has performed the same duty too many times to count. The man at the desk sits again and opens the ledger to a new page. The motion is as smooth as water being poured. You realise he is already preparing for the next arrival, the next entry, the next identity, to flatten into a number. The lantern's glow reflects off the wet ink on your forms, giving them a faint sheen before the paper absorbs it entirely. The guard taps his rifle lightly, signalling you to stand. You rise slowly, your knees stiff, your fingers curling around the card in your pocket. Its corners feel sharp against your palm, a small reminder that your place here is no longer defined by who you were, but by the digits assigned in neat black strokes. You step back toward the door, the room shrinking behind you. The lantern flickers once more, casting a brief, trembling shadow across the desk. The air outside greets you with a colder intensity, slipping beneath your collar and down your spine. The sky has darkened further, the daylight thinning into a colourless haze. The guard motions for you to walk. You follow him along the narrow path between the barracks. The snow crunches beneath both of your steps in a slow, synchronized rhythm. The camp stretches out ahead, buildings arranged in rows that feel less like shelter and more like sections of a catalogued collection. Your breath hangs in the air in faint, dissolving plumes. You move forward, guided by the card in your pocket, by the ledger now bearing your number, by the quiet machinery of a place that records everything except humanity. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the cold and the administrative silence, the earth waits for you, deep, dark, and unyielding. The path toward the barracks narrows as you walk, the snow hardened into uneven ridges by countless feet that followed the same route long before yours. The guard beside you moves with a steady, unhurried pace, his boots sinking only slightly with each step. You hear the faint rustle of the paper folder tucked under his arm, the sound almost lost beneath the wind's low, continuous hum. Ahead, the buildings stand in neat rows, their shapes softened by the creeping dusk. The door to the structure opens with a muted groan when he pushes it. You step inside, and the cold retreats only slightly, replaced by a different kind of chill, one that feels lived in, settled, and resigned. The air is thick with the scent of damp wood, unwashed fabric, and bodies attempting sleep more through necessity than desire. A thin haze hangs in the room, likely from breath that never quite escapes, trapped beneath the low ceiling beams. Rows of bunks stretch into the dimness, arranged with the same strict order you've seen everywhere else in the camp. Each frame is narrow, built from rough timber that looks as though it was fashioned quickly and with minimal care. The mattresses are thin pads filled with straw, flattened unevenly by those who occupied them before. Some bunks sit empty, others hold silent figures lying on their backs or sides, their faces turned toward the wall or the ceiling as if awaiting instruction from a dreamless state. A lantern hangs near the entrance, its glow barely reaching the far end of the room. It casts a long, trembling shadow across the floor, exaggerating the unevenness of the boards. You feel your eyes strain against the subdued light, adjusting slowly to the muted shapes that blend into one another. Nothing in the room welcomes you. It simply acknowledges your presence with the same indifference the rest of the camp has shown. The guard sets the folder on a small table beside the door and picks up a clipboard marked with rows of names, numbers, and signatures. He scans it briefly, tapping the end of his pencil against one line. When he finds the number assigned to you, he marks it with a quick stroke, then gestures toward an empty bunk halfway down the row. The gesture is small, as though he is pointing out a shelf in storage, rather than a place for a person to rest. You move toward it without speaking. Your footsteps echo softly in the long room. The others barely look up, their eyes sliding past you, as though you're another passing draft of cold air. You sense that this kind of arrival happens often enough to blend into the nightly routine. You reach the bunk and place your hand on the wooden frame. It feels dry and coarse, as though the structure exists only to meet the requirements of shelter without ever offering comfort. You sit and the straw beneath you shifts with a faint rustle, releasing a faint, musty scent. The pad sinks under your weight, uneven and lumpy, yet undeniably present. For a moment you rest your hands on your thighs, letting your shoulders drop slightly. The room hums with quiet breathing, punctuated occasionally by a cough or the subtle creak of someone turning in their sleep. You remove your coat, folding it carefully and placing it beside you. The air clings to your skin with a cold persistence, but it feels different from the outdoor wind, a subdued chill shaped by breath and fatigue rather than weather. You lie back slowly, letting your body sink into the thin layer of straw. The ceiling beams loom above you, rough-hewn and stained by years of smoke, condensation and silence. As you settle, the guard moves down the row, checking the numbers of those already resting. His boots make soft, rhythmic thuds on the wooden planks. He stops occasionally, nodding to himself or making a brief mark on his clipboard. To him, the room is a ledger of breathing bodies arranged in consistent lines. The lantern near the door flickers again, casting shifting shadows against his uniform. When he reaches the end of the room, he turns, walks back to the entrance, and hooks the lantern onto a metal bracket. He lowers its flame slightly with a turn of the knob. The room grows dimmer, the edges of the bunks fading into charcoal outlines. After a final glance across the rows, he leaves, closing the door behind him with a soft thud. The sound settles into the room like a command. You let out a slow breath that fogs briefly in the air above you. The warmth from your body begins to blend into the cold of the mattress, creating a thin, temporary layer of comfort that feels rationed. You pull the rough blanket over yourself, its weight unexpectedly heavy, as if woven from more than just thread. It carries the faint smell of smoke and old sweat, but also something more neutral, something functional. Sleep here is less an act and more an assignment. You feel it not as a release, but as another step in the schedule that now governs your existence. The stillness around you isn't peaceful. It is procedural, a quiet, drafted by necessity. You hear the rhythm of breathing from nearby bunks, each inhale and exhale measured, controlled, restrained. Bodies lie in place like entries arranged across a page. The window, near the far wall, lets in a faint sliver of the outside world, a narrow thread of moonlight glinting against frost. It does not brighten the room. It simply marks the presence of night without offering solace. You turn your head slightly to watch the soft glow along the frame, noticing the pattern of ice that has crept up the panes. The frost resembles delicate handwriting, sweeping lines etched by cold that never hesitates. The straw beneath you shifts again as your muscles relax. You feel a dull ache settle into your back, a tightness shaped by the long journey, the processing, the cold. Your hands rest on the blanket, fingers slightly curled, still remembering the sharp edges of the card tucked into your pocket. It presses against your side through the fabric of your coat, an unwavering reminder of the number assigned to you. Around you, the other prisoners sink deeper into their own versions of rest. Someone near the front turns in their bunk, causing the frame to creak softly. Another releases a sigh that drifts through the room in a thin wisp. The air feels shared, rationed between every person lying within these wooden walls. You breathe it slowly, matching the quiet rhythm that has already settled into place. A faint draft slips through a gap near the window, brushing against your cheek with cold fingertips. It carries the scent of the night outside, pine, snow, and distant smoke from the chimneys. The softness of the draft contrasts with the heaviness of the air inside, creating a narrow space between discomfort and endurance. Your eyelids grow heavier, though sleep still feels like something you must follow rather than something that arrives naturally. The darkness thickens gently, shaping the room into a single, subdued mass. The outline of your bunk blurs at the edges, and the ceiling beams fade into a soft haze. You close your eyes briefly, opening them again as the blanket settles more firmly across your chest. The quiet deepens, wrapping around you like a regulation issued without emotion. A few final murmurs drift from the far end of the barracks, then dissolve into silence. You hear the snow outside shifting under the wind, the faint groan of the wooden walls adjusting to temperature changes, the distant clatter of something being moved near the guardhouse. The sounds merge into a slow, steady hum, guiding you toward the kind of rest that feels more obligatory than restful. Your breathing aligns with the unspoken rhythm of the room. You allow your body to sink deeper into the thin mattress, your hands resting still. The cold remains, but it has softened at the edges, settling into a background presence. Somewhere beyond the walls, the lights of the camp dim, one by one, each extinguished in accordance with routines older than anyone lying here. The night stretches forward, long and unbroken, waiting for dawn to call you back to the world outside these wooden planks. For now, you lie quietly in the barracks, assigned a place, a number, and a sleep that feels more like a scheduled pause than a reprieve. A faint tremor passes through the barracks long before your eyes open. It isn't a sound, not exactly, more a shift in the air, the subtle rearranging of breath and weight as bodies around you prepare to rise. You sense it before you understand it, a quiet signal woven into the fibers of the blanket pressed against your chest. The room carries the stillness of an unfinished task, a pause that has stretched as far as it is allowed. Your eyelids lift slowly. The ceiling remains dim, blurred at the edges, as if refusing to reveal itself all at once. The lantern at the front of the room has been lit to its faintest setting, the flame tucked low, offering the bare minimum of illumination needed for the early stirrings of the barracks. The air carries a deeper chill than the night before, as if the cold has settled beside you while you slept, waiting for this moment to make itself known. You inhale, and the breath enters your lungs with the weight of damp wood and stale fabric. The mattress beneath you feels even thinner now, the straw inside compressed into hard ridges that press against your back. You shift slightly, hearing the quiet rustle of someone nearby doing the same. The room is waking, not through choice, but through the inevitable pull of a routine grounded in necessity rather than comfort. A distant whistle slices through the morning, muted by the thickness of the walls. It rises and falls with practiced precision. The sound is not urgent, yet it leaves no room for hesitation. It is the call that shapes the day, as fixed and unavoidable as the frost on the window panes. The bodies around you respond with slow, measured movements. Blankets are folded back, feet slide over the edge of bunks, and boots scrape softly against the floor. You sit up, the blanket falling from your shoulders in a stiff, uneven fold. The cold finds your skin immediately, slipping beneath your shirt and settling against your spine. You momentarily hold your breath, not out of defiance, but as a small instinctive act of bracing against the day ahead. The quiet remains dense, shared between you and the others, like an unspoken agreement forged by fatigue. Your boots rest where you placed them last night. When you reach for them, the leather feels rigid, molded by the freezing air. You tug them on, your fingers numb and slow, the laces stiff beneath your touch. Somewhere near the door, a guard steps inside, his presence filling the space with a sense of order rather than authority. He doesn't need to speak. His appearance alone is enough to move the final stragglers out of their bunks. Standing takes effort. Your legs feel heavy, the muscles stiff from the cold and from sleep that offered little restoration. You stretch slowly, your shoulders cracking softly under the room's dim light. Around you, figures move in the same steady, resigned rhythm. There is no rush, only the shared understanding that delay is unnecessary. The schedule has already determined the shape of your morning. You make your way toward the exit, following the slow procession of bodies, shifting through the narrow space between bunks. The air grows colder as you approach the door. A thin draft slips through the cracks, carrying with it the scent of outside, smoke from the cookhouse, iron from the tools stored for the coming shift, and the unmistakable edge of dawn that has not yet arrived. When the guard opens the door wider, the cold sweeps in, touching your face with a sharpness that pulls your breath shallow. You step outside, and the morning greets you not with light, but with the muted darkness that lingers just before sunrise. The sky is a pale, washed-out grey, its edges blurred by drifting snow. The camp looks different at this hour. More angular, more silent, its structures outlined in frost like entries in an orderly manual. Your breath forms small clouds that dissipate quickly. You fall into step with those around you, the group moving as a collective shape rather than individuals. The snow beneath your boots crunches in a steady pattern, each footfall blending into the next until it becomes a kind of quiet drumbeat guiding you forward. The barracks behind you fade into the background as you walk deeper into the camp. Ahead lies the mess hall, a long, low building with smoke curling weakly from its pipe. The door hangs slightly ajar, letting out a thin ribbon of warmer air. As you approach, the scent of porridge blends with the cold, forming a dull reassurance that food, at least in some form, exists waiting for you. Inside, the hall is dimly lit, its windows fogged over. Wooden tables stretch across the room, and prisoners gather around them in controlled lines. The bowls set out are small, the portions modest, but the warmth that rises from them is enough to soften the edge of the morning. You take your place, receiving your ration from a ladle that moves with mechanical consistency. The porridge is thick, nearly solid, its surface pale and uninviting. You eat because the movements are familiar, spoon to bowl to mouth, but the taste does not linger. Voices remain quiet, shaped more by necessity than conversation. The clinking of metal spoons against bowls forms a rhythmic echo that fills the room. You sit, your breath still faintly visible in the air, and focus on swallowing each mouthful. The warmth settles in your stomach slowly, offering only the slightest buffer against the cold waiting outside. When the meal is finished, you place your empty bowl on the table, its surface already cooling. The guard near the door signals for everyone to rise. Chairs scrape lightly against the floor, and the group moves toward the exit with the same steady resignation as before. Outside, the sky has brightened only slightly. The sun remains hidden beyond the horizon, but the frost along the rooftops begins to shimmer with the promise of its eventual arrival. The wind presses against your coat as you step out. You brace yourself, pulling the fabric tighter around your frame. The path ahead leads toward the tool shed, and beyond it, the mine itself. Its entrance a dark, unyielding opening carved into the earth. The ground slopes gently downward, the snow thinning into patches of exposed soil and rock. Your breath deepens as you walk. The cold fills your lungs with a sensation that borders on weight. The guard at the front of the group sets the pace, his steps heavy but precise. You follow, each movement shaped by the unspoken expectation that the day must begin on time without deviation. The tool shed looms closer, a squat structure built from weathered boards. The door stands open, revealing racks of picks, shovels, and lamps arranged with rigid uniformity. Inside, the air is tinged with the metallic scent of iron and the faint sweetness of oil. A worker behind a counter distributes equipment with the efficiency of someone who no longer needs to examine each item. His hands move quickly, passing out the tools one by one. When he hands you your pick, the cold metal rests against your palm with surprising weight. The handle is rough from years of use, worn smooth in some places, splintered in others. The lamp you receive is small, its glass smudged, its flame weak but steady. You adjust the strap, letting it hang from your belt, its glow barely reaching the snow at your feet. The group begins moving again, this time toward the mine. The landscape grows harsher, the air denser. The earth seems to rise and fall beneath you with a kind of strained discomfort, as if reluctant to bear the constant intrusion of human labour. The entrance to the tunnel stands ahead, a dark, gaping mouth framed by wooden supports that groan quietly in the shifting wind. The morning light still hasn't broken fully. The day waits, suspended in a state of cold anticipation. You tighten your grip on the pick, feeling the grain of the handle press into your palm. Dawn may be coming, but it is not yours. It belongs to the schedule, to the labour, to the earth that demands to be carved open again and again. You step toward the entrance, your breath steady, your body prepared for the darkness that waits to receive you. The line of bodies begins moving as soon as the tools are distributed. No order is shouted, no urgency imposed, just the quiet, collective understanding that movement itself is the requirement. Your boots sink slightly into the frozen layer beneath the snow, leaving prints that will be overwritten by countless other steps before the day ends. The cold slips between your ribs in thin, deliberate strands, tightening with each breath you release. The path stretches ahead in a pale, colourless ribbon. Snow gathers along the edges where wind has pushed it into drifts, forming soft, uneven mounds. In the distance, the mine's entrance sits like a dark punctuation mark carved into the earth, its shape stark against the faint grey of the sky. The world around you seems suspended, awake but unwilling, as if the landscape itself has been called from a restless sleep to perform its own daily labour. You walk without hurry. The pace is set by the weight of the tools on shoulders and the stiffness in limbs, unprepared for the cold. The procession feels less human and more like a river with a predetermined course, each figure drifting forward because there is nowhere else to go. The crunch of snow underfoot merges into a steady rhythm, muted by the weight of dust lingering in the air from previous day's work. The wind rises occasionally, brushing against your cheek with the flat, indifferent touch of something that has long grown tired of the land it crosses. It carries with it the scent of coal and damp stone, faint at first, then stronger with each step. The smell is not harsh, but it has a density to it, a thickness that clings to skin and clothing as if marking you for the work ahead. A guard walks alongside the group, his posture relaxed, his attention drifting with the same distant quality as the morning light. His presence is less a threat and more an extension of the schedule, another moving part in a larger mechanism. He glances periodically toward the horizon, checking nothing in particular. The rifle slung across his back sways slightly with each step, reflecting a dull glimmer in the dim light. The mine grows larger as you approach, its mouth framed by wooden beams darkened by years of moisture and dust. The boards are thick, reinforced with metal bolts that have rusted around the edges. The supports groan quietly when the wind presses against them, as if each structure carries its own fatigue. You feel the air shift around you, growing heavier, charged with the quiet presence of a place that consumes effort without recognition. Before reaching the entrance, the path splits around a shallow pit where carts sit waiting to be filled. The wheels are caked with mud, hardened by cold, their metal rims dented from long use. Tracks wind into the tunnel and disappear into darkness, the rails coated in a thin layer of frost that catches the faintest hint of reflected light. The sight is unsettling, not because of its danger, but because of its familiarity. This system has existed long enough for countless feet to carve it into habit. As the group slows, you take in the ground beneath you. The snow thins into patches where the earth has been disturbed so often that it refuses to hold a covering. What remains is a mixture of soil, stone fragments, and coal dust, forming a muted palette of grey and brown. Each step sends up a small puff of particles that drift sluggishly before settling again, giving the surface a living quality, as though it breathes in shallow, laboured intervals. Your fingers tighten around the handle of your pick, feeling the cold press through the wood. The lantern at your side knocks softly against your thigh with each step, emitting a faint clink that blends into the ambient hum of movement around you. The glow inside the glass flickers lightly, its small flame fighting against the settling drafts that coil near the mine's entrance. The wind grows weaker here, hesitant to push into the space shaped by earth and shadow. The silence shifts in tone, becoming thicker, more deliberate. People around you adjust their caps, their gloves, their coats, as though preparing themselves, not for danger, but for duration. The mine does not threaten, it absorbs. It will take hours piece by piece, not through drama, but through steady, unchanging demand. A slight slope leads downward, the ground damp beneath the dust. Wooden planks are laid here, arranged in uneven steps, meant to give traction where the soil softens. Your boots press into them, carefully, as the group descends. The boards creak under the weight of so many bodies passing over them, their fibres strained but not broken. You feel the sound in your legs more than you hear it. Near the entrance, a small shed stands to one side. Its door hangs open, revealing crates stacked with spare tools. Hammers, chisels, coils of rope. Shadows pool inside the corners, giving the objects the appearance of sleeping creatures waiting to be summoned. A thin layer of frost coats the metal surfaces, dulling their edges. You can see the marks left by hands that lifted them earlier in the morning, faint smudges that break the frost in the shape of fingers. The guard at the front stops, taking a moment to scan the group. He says nothing, simply observing, confirming that everyone has arrived. His expression does not change, though his breath rises in soft clouds that dissolve quickly. Once he is satisfied, he steps aside, allowing the procession to move toward the entry without fanfare. You approach the opening slowly. The darkness inside appears less like an absence of light and more like a substance, thick and settled, ready to envelop whatever crosses its threshold. The wooden beams creak again as the wind shifts, and a few grains of dust drift from the ceiling, catching on your coat sleeve as they fall. You brush them off instinctively before stepping closer. The last sliver of pale morning hangs at your back. The cold air here feels different, denser, shaped by the earth's depth. You stand for a moment, inhaling the mix of moisture, soil, and old stone that reaches you from within the tunnel. The scent is faintly metallic, carrying a quiet weight that settles on your tongue. Around you, the others adjust their lanterns, checking that their flames are steady. The soft glow illuminates small pockets of the entrance, revealing scratches on the wooden beams, grooves carved by years of contact with rough clothing, tools, and hands reaching for balance. The textures form a silent record of those who walked this path long before you. You look ahead, the darkness stretching into the earth like a corridor of forgotten time. The mind does not beckon, nor does it warn. It simply waits, timeless and unwavering, its existence shaped entirely by the labour it consumes. Your grip tightens on the pick once more. The cold presses along your spine. The steps behind you grow faint as the next bodies move forward. Then, without ceremony, you cross the threshold, leaving the pale morning behind and entering the wound cut into the land. A wound you are expected to deepen with every hour that follows. The tunnel swallows sound as soon as you pass its threshold. The small halo of the lamp at your belt refracts against the damp timbers and dies a few feet ahead, leaving everything beyond a suggestion rather than a shape. Your breath, which had been visible and measured in the open, now condenses close to your face and seems to linger, reluctant to leave the dense air. Here the world compresses to a few elements: the feels of the handle pressed into your palm, the scrape of a boot on packed earth, the dull echo of tools meeting stone. You adjust the lamp, turning its wick low. The glass is smudged with coal dust and the faint fingerprints of hands that have done this work for years. The flame is not meant to chase away darkness so much as to mark a small movable patch of reality, a place you can call your own for the duration of a shift. It paints the immediate space in a thin, gullible warmth that the tunnel refuses to accept as real. Beyond that circle, the black is patient, waiting in the exact way that orders are patient, constant, unblinking, unimpressed. The path narrows. Timbers press closer to your shoulders, as if the earth itself had been instructed to hold tighter. Water beads at the junctions, where wood meets stone, then runs in measured threads that find grooves and sink into the ground. Each droplet's fall joins the low percussion that underlies everything, a metronome of small impacts, marking time in a place where calendars mean nothing. The smell here is of damp mineral, an old sweat, of iron and clay, and the faint metallic tang that clings to the tongue after prolonged inhalation. You keep your head low. There is an economy to movement beneath the surface. Conserve breath, steady the lamp. Place your foot precisely where others have placed theirs. The tunnel seems to have been cut by habit more than design. The edges are irregular, the supports patched where rot or pressure claimed them. Scratches rim the timber like a ledger of contact. Names never written, efforts only implied by the grooves worn into the wood. Voices are small here, more a series of soft consonants and exhalations than conversation. When someone coughs, the sound combs through the shaft and lands like a stone dropped in a distant well. You learn quickly that noise attracts attention, not out of malice, but because every sound reverberates, multiplies, and adds to the fatigue hung along the tunnel's shoulders. Silence in this place is a pragmatic decision. As you move deeper, the temperature changes in an almost deliberate manner. The air grows marginally warmer, not from comfort but from the accumulated presence of many bodies and the exertion of limbs. The cold that had been a companion above ground retreats into a background ache, replaced by a damp heaviness that presses at your chest. Your lungs slowly accept the thickness, mechanics adjusting to the new normal. Inhale, hold, exhale, repeat. Breathing becomes a metered task, each draw of air measured against the work to be done. The first task is always orientation, where the vein runs, which face has been marked for the day, which seam will yield rock or refuse. Markings on the timber tell the story. Chalked arrows, scratched lines, a rag tied to a nail, suggesting a place to stop. You pass these without fanfare. Your eyes have been trained to read the environment as a set of instructions rather than a landscape. The mind communicates in shorthand. You learn to understand without asking questions. You reach the work face. It arrives not with ceremony, but with the natural finality of a job begun again. The wall of stone looms close enough that the lamp's glow picks out grains and fissures, the layered history of pressure and mineral resting like the rings of a tree. A coach light hung on a peg sheds a narrower beam, and under its glare you see the marks of previous efforts. Chisel scars, larger gouges where a blast loosened a section, dark streaks where veins of ore have been tried and judged wanting. The face is both a boundary and a promise. Promise in the sense that rock will yield something if bent enough, and boundary in the sense that time within this small room defines the limit of your day. Hands take their places. The pick settles into the grip you have formed without thinking. You feel the points of the tool catch in the wood of the handle as if greeting an old companion. The first blow lands and the sound is immediate, sharp, raw, the kind of noise that is not meant to announce itself, but to be counted. The echo bounces back, multiplied and hollowed by the tunnel's curves, and somewhere in that returning sound, a measure of your effort is recorded. You strike again, slowly at first, then with a rhythm that becomes the day's pulse. Muscle learns to move in specific ways here. Rotate the waist, drive the shoulders, let the forearms do the small adjustments. The body converts into economy. Pain arrives as a precise instrument rather than a catastrophe. Tightness in the palms, a grind behind the knees, the ache that sits at the base of the skull. Pain maps your limits and becomes the quiet business of the day. You accept it without narration. Complaint would be a distraction, and distraction in this environment is costly. Around you, the shaft produces its own music. The scrape of shovel on stone, the dull thud of a sledge against channeled seams, the whisper of dust falling from the ceiling after a successful strike. These sounds form a practical chorus. Men work in a staggered pattern so that the echo of one does not drown another. A choreographed exchange dictated by the need to preserve breathing space in an already tight atmosphere. Occasionally, an overseer's voice cuts through, short, precise commands that require no elaboration. Yet those calls are sparse. The shaft's management prefers the slow grind of institutional momentum to frequent direction. Dust is a constant companion. It rises in pale clouds each time you drive the pick point into the rock, clinging to the damp warmth of your skin, settling in the crease of elbows and the hollows behind knees. On the tongue, it tastes faintly of metal and old earth. When it finds the back of the throat, the cough that follows is small and habitual, not dramatic, an accepted punctuation mark to each hour. Over time, the dust trades place with memory, filling spaces where details once resided, leaving only the most necessary impressions. There are moments, rare and small, when the shaft offers something like clarity. A vein exposed that glints faintly in the lamp, a square of rock that breaks away cleanly and makes a sound sharp enough to cut the ambient murmur. These instants register as minor triumphs. They are quickly archived in the mind, stored not as joy, but as evidence of utility, Today's work had effect. The day achieved something measurable. Such small results circulate among labourers like currency. A word passes, a nod given, an unspoken tally updated. Yet any small relief is immediately tempered by the broader calculus of the place. The shaft's structure itself imposes limits. Timbers must be set at intervals, supports adjusted, warnings noted where a seam bulges or water seeps more frequently. Safety is procedural rather than principled. Rules applied by rote to maintain output rather than to preserve life. You learn to watch for the signs that someone else taught you to notice without sentiment. A bulge in the timber, a drip that darkens the stone, the sudden quiet that follows the last clumsy strike and signals that someone has tired too far. Time here is measured differently. Clocks above ground mean little. Down below, the day is segmented by the progression of tasks, the initial braking, the loading of carts, the trundling of ore along rails, the return with empty buckets. There are no grand reckonings, only the small repeated cycles that become a day. Strike, clear, cart, return. Each cycle consumes minutes that feel like they could stretch into days and yet collapse under the weight of repetition. The cart system moves with a predictable efficiency. Men shovel broken rock into small tubs, which are then dragged or pushed along narrow rails toward the mouth of the shaft. The clack of wheels against rails is another metronome, another pulse that defines the day's rhythm. When a cart fills, it becomes temporarily heavy with meaning. When it empties, the act is as unremarkable as the returning to place. Hands roughen, calluses deepen, and the skin itself forms a new vocabulary. Scars as annotations, blisters as footnotes. Conversations, when they occur, are utilitarian. Names are seldom used. Instead, references are made to tasks and positions. Talk focuses on angles, on the smell of a seam, on the way a particular rock tends to flake. Personal histories are impractical commodities in this economy. If stories surface, they do so in the shape of shorthand. A remembered technique, a tip that moves the day's work forward by an inch, a warning from someone who has learned the pattern of collapse. Otherwise, silence settles like a directive. When your shift closes, the movement toward the mouth of the shaft feels like a slow exhalation. The lamp's warmth recedes with each step toward the opening. The air outside seems almost alien in its clarity. Your lungs register the difference sharply, as though waking from a long, thin dream. You feel the change in pressure in your ears, the way your limbs uncoil with the release of subterranean confinement. Dust, though, stays within. Traces of it cling to clothing and hair, a reminder that the shaft marks you and takes up residence. Emerging back into the weak light, you notice how the sky holds its pale indifference, unchanged by the small economies played out beneath it. The mine remains a still, dark mouth in the earth, its presence unchanged by day's work. The tally of broken stone and loaded carts adds to a ledger no one present will ever read in full. You walk away with the pick on your shoulder and the smell of earth in your clothes, feeling the slight stiffness that accompanies a body shaped by repeated tasks. You will do it again, tomorrow, because here, repetition is not habit but obligation. The darkness you have learned to navigate is not simply the absence of light. It is a place with rules, a place that instructs through weight and echo. It keeps you busy, it preserves order, and it files each day into a growing archive of small, precise actions. For now, though, the sound of your footsteps on the path toward the camp is the only commentary the world offers. The shaft behind you settles into quiet, waiting to receive the next set of hands. The path back from the tunnel widens just slightly as you approach the storage racks where tools are returned between shifts. The air outside is sharper now, cutting through the thin veil of warmth your body accumulated underground. The transition feels abrupt, as if the world above has been reset in your absence. You tighten your grip on the pick, its weight settling in your shoulder with a familiarity that is neither comforting nor hostile, simply present, like an obligation that does not require your consent. The racks stand in rows beside the miner's path, each beam darkened from years of hands, placing tools in the same worn grooves. The wood has been compressed in places, bowed in others, and the nails holding the structure together jut out at odd angles, rust forming where cold and use have stripped the metal bare. The tools arranged along the racks carry a strange, quiet dignity, not because of what they achieve, but because of how long they have endured. Their surfaces are dented, their handles smoothed by friction, their edges dulled and resharpened countless times. They give no indication of who held them last. Each life that touched them has been rubbed away by time and repetition. You set your pick against the beam, hearing the faint clack of metal meeting wood. For a moment, your fingers linger along the handle, tracing the small dips where someone's grip wore deeper grooves. The wood carries a history of pressure points, the indentation of palms that once pressed into it with the same fatigue, the same persistence. Tools here are not personal. They simply pass from one set of hands to another, outlasting each person by design rather than neglect. Near the far rack, a miner returns his shovel, sliding it into place with practiced ease. The tool wobbles slightly before settling. His hands are coated in fine dust that clings to the lines of his knuckles, gathering in small crescents beneath his nails. He wipes them against his coat, but the fabric is too saturated with dirt to make a difference. When he steps back, his shoulders sag, not in defeat, but in the kind of acceptance that settles into the body when the day is shaped entirely by necessity. You move toward the next rack, where replacement tools are kept for the following shift. The guard overseeing the exchange stands by the shed door, his breath forming thin layers of frost along the wool of his scarf. He checks each tool without much interest, counting them the way one might count bolts or bricks. When you approach, he nods toward a pile of picks, stacked haphazardly on the ground. Their handles cross like branches in a forgotten woodpile, their heads dull with frost. You choose one, not by preference, because preference is irrelevant here, but by proximity. Lifting it, you feel the shift in balance where the metal meets the wood. The pick is heavier than the one you used earlier, though perhaps that perception is only the fatigue in your arms. The weight settles in your grip with a stubborn, unavoidable presence. Tools have no sympathy for the bodies that wield them. They function, break, are repaired or replaced, and continue without pause. You sense that if you were removed from this place, the pick would simply find its way into someone else's hands. The next morning, its purpose unchanged. A shovel lies nearby, its edges uneven from a long day of scraping stone and earth. You pick it up as well, feeling the slight sway of the handle as it adjusts to your movements. The wood is worn smooth, but not from care, more from the erosion of repetitive use. It carries the faint scent of soil and sweat, layered over years until the original grain of the wood is barely visible. You balance it across your shoulder, the metal head pointing downward, droplets of condensed moisture sliding from its curve and disappearing into the dust at your feet. The guard finishes his count and gestures for the group to return to the path. You fall into line with the others, the tools weighing down your hands and shoulders in a way that feels ceremonial rather than burdensome. The procession forms naturally, each person measuring their steps by the slow pace of the one ahead. Footprints overlap in the snow, forming paths that have been carved so many times that the ground remembers them, without effort. The sky above has begun to dim further, clouds gathering in a thickening sheet that diffuses the light into a pale wash. The air predicts snow soon, light flakes at first, then a heavier fall that will cover everything in a fresh temporary uniformity. You look toward the camp, its buildings standing silent and orderly, their roofs outlined by frost. Smoke rises from a single chimney, the thin ribbon curling upward in a wavering line before dissolving into the grey. The tools shift slightly as you walk, their weight pulling at your muscles. Each step triggers a small repetitive tug along your shoulders and back, an irritation that grows slowly, not sharply. The ache feels less like pain and more like a reminder of the mind's permanence. The tools, unchanged by the labour they demand, seem to carry a quiet indifference toward those who wield them. They will continue long after your body weakens, long after your name is forgotten. This knowledge sits with you in a way that does not stir fear, only a strange, distant clarity. The path slopes upward as you approach the camp structures. The snow here is thinner, trampled into hardened patches by hundreds of boots moving along the same route throughout the day. The crunch beneath your feet shifts in tone, becoming a duller, more compact sound. The wind changes direction, carrying with it the faint murmur of voices from the mess hall, the clink of metal trays, the tired hush of bodies standing in line for their meals. The tools at your sides feel out of place in this moment of transition, yet you keep them close, because the next part of the day requires them just as much as the hours below ground did. You reach the storage shed, its door open just enough for the guard inside to monitor the returning crowd. He stands behind a small table, leaning casually against its edge. His coat hangs open, and a thin stream of smoke rises from the cigarette resting between his fingers. His eyes remain half-lidded, travelling from tool to tool with a measured disinterest. Each time someone steps forward, he lifts a hand to accept their pick or shovel, tapping it lightly on the table before sliding it into one of the wooden compartments behind him. When it is your turn, he extends his hand. You offer the shovel first. He weighs it briefly, checking the condition of the metal head, then places it in a slot where other worn shovels lean. The picks are handled similarly, his fingers tapping the handle, checking for cracks or splinters, ensuring it remains functional for future use. When he nods for you to step aside, the gesture is small but definitive. The tools no longer belong to you, though they never truly did. With your hands empty, the cold settles along your palms with fresh sharpness. You rub your fingers together, feeling the stiffness in your joints. The guard retrieves the next tool from another miner, repeating the same motions, the same assessments. His workflow is as practiced as yours, though his tasks lack the weight of earth and stone. Yet he too seems shaped by repetition. You step away from the shed, the absence of weight along your arms both relieving and oddly hollow. The tools, now returned, have resumed their silent vigil, waiting for the next shift. Their presence lingers on your skin, in your muscles, in the subtle pull of fatigue that traces each breath. As you move toward the mess hall, the fading light spreads across the camp. In thin streaks, the structures stand rigid and unmoving, their outlines softened only slightly by the gathering snow. The day continues its slow descent toward evening, its pace measured not by clocks but by the repetition of tasks completed and tools surrendered. Your hands, empty now, hang at your sides. The cold bites again at your knuckles, and still, the memory of the pick's weight lingers. Not as pain, not as burden, but as a reminder of the constancy of tools that will remain long after you leave the path. The line moves back toward the mouth of the mine with the same slow certainty the evening before carried. The air has thickened with an early layer of cold that settles across exposed skin and finds its way through layers of cloth. The dawn's faint promise has long since evaporated, leaving only a pale wash of light that does not warm, does not comfort, does not lift. It simply illuminates what must be done. Your hands feel heavier than the tools you carried moments ago. The weight left behind by their absence lingers inside your muscles in a way that makes your fingers curl slightly, as if still gripping the handle of a pick that is no longer there. When you breathe, the air drags through your chest, with the slow rasp of lungs coated in fine residue. The dust doesn't leave with the shift. It settles deep inside, clinging to the soft edges of breath until each inhale feels slightly narrower than the one before. The group moves through the gate, boots grinding lightly against the mixture of snow and coal dust that blankets the ground. A guard unlocks the latch to the path leading back toward the work areas, the faint clang of metal against metal carried away by the wind. You follow the movements without thought, your body falling into the routine that shapes every step. There is no rush, no delay, only the steady drift forward, led by necessity rather than intention. A low cloud of dust still hangs above the entrance to the mine, stirred by the morning air. It hovers suspended, as though unwilling to rise or settle. Lamps flicker faintly in the hands of those ahead of you, their small circles of light bobbing like lanterns carried across dark water. You adjust your own, tightening the strap so it rests more securely against your hip. The metal casing is cold against your coat. When you touch it with your fingers, a brief sting travels up your hand. Inside the mine, the familiar constriction of space closes around you. The air thickens almost immediately, replacing the sharp cold with a damp, heavy chill that sinks to the bone. Your boots sink slightly into the mixture of mud and crushed stone along the tunnel floor, each step creating a faint suction sound that blends with the low hum of distant work. The beams along the ceiling creak softly, groaning under the strain of earth pressed tightly above them. You take in the darkness ahead and feel the slight pull in your chest, the shift from open air to the compressed quiet of the tunnels. It is not fear but recognition. This space has a way of acknowledging your presence without welcoming it. Its walls carry the memory of countless strikes, countless footsteps, countless breaths left behind as dust. Every surface feels worn by effort, shaped not by nature, but by the relentless insistence of human hands carving into a landscape indifferent to their survival. When you reach your assigned section, the scent of damp stone and crushed minerals fills your nose. The air carries the faint tang of metal and the raw, gritty smell of rock recently broken. It coats your tongue when you draw in a breath, gathering like sediment at the back of your throat. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dimness, the lamp's glow painting the uneven surface of the rock face in shallow relief. You pick up the chisel left near the timber support, its surface cold and slightly pitted. The handle bears the marks of long use, shallow indentations where fingers have repeatedly pressed, smoothing the wood into its current shape. When you lift the striking tool, the weight settles into your wrist. With a familiar heaviness, your arms feel the residue of yesterday's labour, but the movement of lifting, positioning, striking still comes naturally, mechanical, practiced, necessary. The first strike is quiet compared to the echo of earlier shifts. The rock accepts the impact with a dull thud that reverberates along your arm and up into your shoulder. Small flecks of mineral break free, glinting briefly in the lamp's beam before descending into dust. You strike again, and the sound spreads into the tunnel in slow, deliberate ripples. Each impact releases more dust into the air, forming a cloud that settles against your skin, mixing with the sweat that forms despite the cold. Your breathing deepens, pulling in air that tastes of the earth itself. The dust coats your lungs in layers so fine you only notice them when you exhale. The breath leaves your mouth in a muted plume that seems to carry a faint grey tint in the lamplight. You continue your work. Strike, shift, strike, your body adjusting to the rhythm as though the movements were written into your muscles. Around you, the low chorus of labour continues. The scrape of shovels, pushing loose stone into carts. The dull thud of hammers meeting support beams. The faint hiss of lanterns burning low. None of it forms a melody. It is a steady accumulation of sound that fills the tunnel like a dense fog. You hear the coughs of miners farther down the shaft, short and contained, the type that tries to clear a throat coated with residue that will never fully leave. You switch tools, pressing the shovel into the loosened stone. The handle fits awkwardly at first, then settles into the natural curve of your grip. The metal head scrapes against the floor with a gritty sound as you push the debris into a waiting tub. Dust rises again, clinging to the sweat along your jaw, settling into the folds of cloth along your sleeves. Each motion adds another layer of fine particles to your skin, your clothes, your lungs. Fatigue gathers slowly, not as a sudden weight, but as a steady pressure behind your ribs, in your shoulders, in the back of your neck. It grows the way dust accumulates, particle by particle, so gradually that only when you pause for breath do you feel how deeply it has settled. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, leaving a faint smear of grey across your skin. Your lamp flickers as you shift your weight. You adjust it again, tightening the strap so it rests firmly against your hip. The flame inside sways gently but remains steady. The dim light reflects off the particles floating in the air, creating a faint halo around each movement you make. It is enough to see, but not enough to shape comfort. The light here is less illumination and more a marker of where the darkness begins. The work continues in its slow, relentless rhythm. When the tub fills, you drag it along the rails toward the main tunnel. The wheels squeal softly, echoing along the curved walls. Another miner pushes past with an empty cart, his face streaked with lines of dust and sweat, eyes half-lidded with concentration. You nod slightly in acknowledgement. He nods back. Words are unnecessary. The dust has already spoken for both of you. On your return, you inhale again and feel the familiar weight settle deeper into your chest. Each breath carries more residue, more fine particles that slow your lungs' expansion. It is not enough to stop you, but enough to remind you. The mine leaves something inside you each day, something you cannot see, cannot measure, but feel with every exhale. You resume your strike. The rock resists with the stubbornness of something that knows it will eventually yield, but not easily. With each blow it gives fractions, not gifts. Your arms move mechanically, the sound of impact blending with the tunnel's constant hum. Dust rises, settles, rises again. Time does not mark itself in hours here, only in the deepening ache, the thickening air, the growing layer of grey along your skin. When a break finally comes, it is not marked by any whistle or announcement. It arrives only when the body insists, when your breath feels narrower, when the tremor in your hands becomes too persistent to ignore. You set the tools down gently, letting the metal rest against the stone. You lean against the timber support, closing your eyes for a moment. The pressure behind your ribs expands slowly, then contracts with your breath. Across the tunnel, someone drinks from a tin cup, the sound of water sloshing faint but unmistakable. The scent of moisture rises briefly, but it does not overpower the dust. You swallow, throat dry and rough. The air around you hangs thick, unmoving. Even rest here feels like work. When you open your eyes again, the dust has settled slightly. You pick up the tool. You adjust your stance. You inhale the earth once more, and then you continue. Your labour measured not in progress or praise, but in the slow accumulation of dust that settles deeper inside you with every breath you take. The ache in your arms grows sharper as the hours stretch, settling into the tendons with a quiet insistence. The tunnel's air thickens further, taking on the texture of a room that has been lived in too long without rest. Dust gathers in thin films along the beam supports, clinging to every surface as though afraid to be displaced. Even the smallest movement sends particles drifting in lazy spirals, catching faint glints of lamplight before sinking back into the earth. A low hum passes through the shaft, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet understood by everyone. Tools pause in mid-motion, strokes tapering off until only the echo remains. You lower your pick slowly, letting the metal rest against your knee as your breath steadies itself for the transition. There is no whistle, no clock, no proclamation that the midday pause has arrived. The moment simply settles into the tunnel like a layer of frost deciding where to land. You wipe the back of your hand across your mouth, feeling the grit scrape lightly against your skin. Your tongue tastes of stone, metal, and stale moisture. The hunger that rises in your stomach feels shallow, flattened beneath fatigue. It isn't the sharp pull of appetite, just a muted awareness that something is missing and must be supplied if the body is to continue its work. Someone ahead bends to collect a small tin pail from where it rests against a support beam. Others retrieve bundles wrapped in cloth. You reach for your own container, its surface cold enough to make your fingers stiffen. The lid sticks slightly before you manage to twist it open. A thin cloud of steam rises, but it dissipates almost immediately, swallowed by the damp chill of the underground air. Whatever warmth the food once held was lost long before the break arrived. The group moves toward a recessed alcove carved into the tunnel wall, an unspoken gathering point shaped not by comfort, but by habit. The ground here is slightly flatter, and the ceiling lifts just enough to allow bodies to sit without crouching entirely. You choose a spot against the wall where the wood beam offers a narrow support for your back. The earth behind it feels colder than the air, as though storing the temperature of a deeper layer untouched by human presence. You lower yourself onto the ground carefully. The dust shifts beneath you, creating a soft cushion that compresses under your weight. The smell of earth is stronger here, mingling with the faint scent of cabbage, potato, and bread carried in the workers' tins. None of it is inviting, but it is food, and the body accepts it without protest. You lift the tin to your mouth and take the first bite. The meal is dense and bland, its texture thick and uneven. The chill makes it solidify more quickly than it should, and the flavour has flattened into something indistinct. Vegetable, grain, a hint of salt if you search for it. It fills the space inside your stomach, but it does not satisfy. You swallow because swallowing is required. Around you, others eat in similar silence. Spoons scrape against metal with slow, steady motions. The sound is soft, rhythmic, and strangely uniform, as though each motion has been timed by the environment itself. A few men sit hunched over their food, shoulders curved like parentheses around their breath. Others lean back against stone, eyes half closed, letting fatigue settle in their bones. The quiet between all of you feels heavy, more like a presence than an absence. One worker clears his throat, the sound echoing briefly before fading into the tunnel's damp acoustics. He mutters something to the man beside him, a short remark about the shift perhaps, or the condition of a support beam farther down the shaft. The words are clipped, softened by caution. The reply is a single nod, barely perceptible. Conversations here do not stretch. They hover for a moment, then collapse under the weight of necessity. Speech carries risk, not always from guards, but from the strain of admitting too much weakness, too much thought, too much self when survival depends on becoming part of the machinery. People keep their voices low, their phrases short, their eyes on the food before them. A gust of colder air drifts into the alcove, slipping along the tunnel like a warning from the surface. The flame of a nearby lamp flickers, bending briefly before straightening again. You pull your coat tighter around your shoulders, the stiff fabric crunching slightly as dust dislodges from its folds. Your hands feel stiff around the tin, the cold metal pressing into your palms with a dry, unforgiving chill. The food goes down slowly. Your jaw tires from the motion, your throat from the effort of swallowing coarse bites. Some workers finish quickly and sit with their backs against the wall, eyes closed in a brief simulation of rest. You eat at a steady pace, neither rushed nor lingering. The act feels more like maintenance than nourishment, a task that must be completed before the next segment of work begins. A faint drip echoes from deeper in the tunnel, water travelling through cracks in the rock before falling into pooled shadows below. The rhythm is irregular, but after a while, it becomes part of the room's quiet structure. Every sense you have narrows to the present moment. The cold tin in your hands, the damp air, the murmur of breathing, the grit beneath your tongue. When the last spoonful is gone, you scrape the bottom of the tin with the edge of your spoon, gathering whatever remnants cling to the metal. You lick the spoon clean, not out of hunger, but habit. The tin is lighter now, but the weight in your stomach feels dense, settling inward with the heaviness of clay. You close the lid and set it beside you, hearing the faint clink as metal meets stone. Across from you, a miner wraps his food cloth back around an unfinished piece of bread. He tucks it carefully into the pocket of his coat, preserving it for the long hours ahead. Another man leans his head against the wall, letting his eyes drift shut. His lips move slightly, as though reciting something faintly remembered, but no sound emerges. A few coughs punctuate the silence, brief, contained, swallowed by the tunnel, before they can linger. Your breath slows as the weight of stillness settles over the group. The alcove, cold and unwelcoming, becomes a brief refuge simply because it lacks movement. You feel dust gather in the folds of your coat, cling to the sweat along your neck, settle into your hair. The silence has grown deeper now, a kind of shared truce between bodies that know what waits beyond the pause. Then, gradually, movement begins again. Someone lifts their tin, another pulls their gloves tighter, another shifts their weight forward, as if preparing to rise. There is no call to return to work. No one announces the end of the break. Time in the mind does not need to be spoken. It is felt, absorbed, measured in the settling of dust and the slowing of breath. You rise with the others. Your legs resist at first, stiff from stillness, but the motion becomes easier as you straighten. The tool you left leaning against the wall waits for your hand. When you reach for it, the handle feels colder than before, the wood dry beneath your fingers. The group forms again without discussion, without prompting. Lamps are lifted, tools are adjusted, the quiet disperses into the tunnel's shadows. Your stomach feels heavier than your limbs. Your breath carries the taste of earth. Your hands bear the memory of metal and stone. The pause is over. You move back toward the work face, guided by the slow pull of another shift that has already begun to reclaim you. You return to the work face with the same slow inevitability that carried you to the alcove. The shaft greets you, not with sound, but with a kind of mute expectation, as though the walls have already prepared themselves for what comes next. Lamps sway gently as everyone takes their place again, their small flames tracing faint arcs against the damp air. The dust stirred by movement settles back down in thin, careful layers, resuming its hold on every surface. The pick fits into your hand without thought, the handle finding the same grooves pressed into your skin earlier. Your body adjusts to the familiar weight, the subtle shift in balance. You brace your feet against the uneven ground and raise the tool toward the rock, feeling the dull pressure in your wrists return before the next strike even lands. When the pick meets the stone again, the impact echoes through your bones with the steady certainty of something that has been happening for far longer than you have been here. The hours stretch without distinction. The only markers of time are the moments when your muscles tighten or when your breath grows shorter. The tunnel does not brighten or dim in a way that tells you anything. Its light is artificial, held inside small flames that burn at the same height until someone adjusts them. The walls hold no shadows that grow longer, no hint of the world outside shifting from morning to afternoon. Instead, the space around you becomes a sealed loop of motion. Strike, lift, shift, breathe. The rhythm settles into your body like a second pulse. Each swing of the pick loosens another fragment of rock, sending it sliding across the ground in muted increments. Your hands grow slick with sweat, the dust forming a thin paste along your palms, smoothing the wood until it becomes harder to grip. You adjust your hold silently, wiping your fingers on the rough fabric of your coat before continuing. Nothing in the tunnel pauses to accommodate human discomfort. The work waits only for your next movement. Occasionally, the chisel catches at an angle that forces you to reposition, the metal slipping slightly against a seam in the stone. The vibrations travel up your arm, gathering in your shoulder where the muscle tugs in quiet protest. You shift your stance and continue, breath rising in short bursts that mingle with the heavy air. The dampness clings to your skin, creating a thin, persistent sheen beneath your clothes. When you breathe deeply, the dust fills your lungs with a familiar heaviness, settling in a way that feels permanent. The sound of the cart wheels grows louder as someone pushes a full load down the rails. The clatter reverberates through the shaft, signaling more material, ready to leave the tunnel. Another miner steps in with an empty cart, nodding once as he passes. His face is coated in a dull grey film, his eyes narrowed against the lamplight. The tracks show the grooves worn by countless wheels before his, each line marking a cycle of effort that has repeated itself without interruption. As you shovel the loosened rock toward the waiting tub, the grains slip through the metal with a metallic rasp. The shovel's edge has grown uneven, its once sharp curve dulled by constant contact with stone. Still, it does its job. The tub fills slowly, each scoop adding a small measure of weight. Your shoulders burn with the effort, the ache settling deep into the joints. Yet the work demands no acknowledgement, only continuation. The rhythm becomes all you know. The tunnel breathes. You follow. There are moments when you forget whether minutes or hours have passed. The repetition dissolves any sense of sequence. The actions become a single, ongoing command executed without question. Even your thoughts begin to align with the work, thinning into the same muted consistency as the dust. The mind tries briefly to wander, grasping at images of open sky, warm air, familiar objects, but the shaft absorbs such thoughts quickly, folding them into its steady hum until only the present remains. Voices remain scarce. The few that do surface are murmured exchanges about tools, adjustments, or warnings, nothing more. Speech feels wasteful here. The tunnel filters sound in a way that makes every word sink into the walls, swallowed before it can travel. Silence is not imposed, it is simply the most practical state. You conserve energy by withholding anything not essential. A tremor briefly ripples through the ground, subtle but unmistakable. The vibration passes beneath your feet, like a small reminder of the weight above. You glance at the timber supports, eyes tracing the grain of the wood for new signs of stress. Nothing seems altered, yet you take half a step back before resuming your work. The others do the same, small instinctual pauses shaped by long familiarity with the mind's language. Time stretches again. You continue. The dust thickens, then thins, then thickens once more. Your breath adjusts, then struggles, then settles. Eventually, the cart nears capacity. You push it along the rails, the wheels catching in places where the tracks bend slightly under the weight. The movement is effortful, but the tunnel guides your steps as though it has memorized them. When the cart reaches the main corridor, a worker hooks it to a small chain, pulling it toward the lift. The chain scrapes against metal, the sound echoing through the shaft in a long grating arc. You return to the work phase. The distance between you and the cart grows again, filled by the space of the tunnel. Your lamp flickers as you move, the flame bending briefly before regaining its steadiness. The light catches on fragments of stone scattered across the ground, highlighting their irregular edges. You bend, pick up the chisel once more, and lift the pick with a familiarity that borders on resignation. When fatigue becomes too sharp to ignore, it doesn't announce itself dramatically. It arrives quietly, spreading a slow numbness through your limbs. Your shoulders sag slightly, and your steps lose a fraction of their precision. You pause only to adjust your grip, to draw in a deeper breath that does not quite satisfy. Your mind stays hollow, wide enough to accept the work without resistance. A faint sound filters through the tunnel, a distant clank, a low murmur, the shifting of tools. It means the cycle continues elsewhere, the same motions repeated by others in sections you cannot see. The mind functions like a single organism, each person a necessary part of the whole, each movement absorbed into a broader rhythm that persists regardless of exhaustion. Hours blur until they feel like a single stretch of grey motion. You no longer search for the end of the shift, you simply keep moving. Your hands are raw by now. The skin along your knuckles has cracked, small crescents of red forming beneath the dust. The ache in your back deepens each time you bend, yet you still lower yourself to shove loose stone into the tub. Your breath feels grainy, as if each inhale pulls in more than air. When you exhale, the movement stirs a faint cloud in front of your face. The work face changes shape under your effort, not enough to feel like progress, but enough to remind you that the mind takes slowly and without gratitude. The stone that breaks away reveals more stone, each layer no different from the last. The ground beneath you shifts, but does not soften. The atmosphere thickens, but does not choke. It simply holds, unwavering. Eventually, a faint signal passes down the tunnel. Not sound, just movement. Bodies pause, tools lower, lamps sway. Your arm drops to your side, your chest tightens with a quiet exhale. The day's rhythm loosens its grip, not ending, but pausing long enough for you to recognize the ache inside your bones. The tunnel remains dim, unmoving. The air hangs heavy. Your breath rises in small plumes. The shift is not over, only the hour has changed its name. The directive continues, as it always does, long, unbroken, measured in stone and dust rather than time. The signal to stop working spreads through the tunnel with the quiet certainty of something long practiced. No words pass from person to person, only the slowing of motion, the lowering of tools, the gradual stillness that moves down the shaft like a shadow. You let the pick rest against the rock, your fingers unfurling stiffly from the handle. The ache in your joints sharpens as the warmth of exertion begins to withdraw, leaving a hollowness that settles into your arms and back. You inhale, drawing in the thick air one more time before stepping away from the work face. The lingering dust in your lungs sits like sediment in a jar, shaken loose only when you cough. The sound echoes in the small space around you, bouncing off the stone with a muted rattle. You wipe your face with the back of your hand, but the smear across your skin only darkens, spreading the grit rather than removing it. The lamp at your side sways as you walk, its glow trembling along the tunnel walls. Others follow behind, their movements slow, deliberate, shaped by fatigue. The narrow corridor fills with the soft clatter of tools being lifted, slung over shoulders, and carried away. Footsteps press into the damp earth, leaving a trail of shallow impressions that will be overlapped by countless more before the night is over. The tunnel itself exhales in a way that feels almost physical, warmth leaving, dust settling, the minor tremors of movement fading into silence. You move through the passage with the familiarity of someone who has walked it enough times to know each turn, each narrowing in the wall, each low beam overhead that requires a slight bow of the head. The mind does not threaten, it simply absorbs, holds and releases with the same impartial rhythm each day. As you approach the mouth of the shaft, a thin draught slips past your face. It carries with it the first hint of open air, cold, sharp, metallic. You breathe it in slowly, feeling the temperature drop as you near the exit. The glow of daylight is faint at first, a pale strip framed by the tunnel's wooden supports. It widens with each step, until the world outside becomes a narrow doorway of grey sky and drifting cold. You step out, and the cold hits your skin like a document being stamped, sharp, decisive, unquestionable. The breath you release becomes a small cloud that dissipates almost instantly, carried away by a wind that cuts across the camp without pause. The earth beneath your boots is frozen in uneven ridges, hardened by the repeated compressions of thousands of identical roots. Nothing in the landscape shifts to acknowledge your emergence. It remains rigid, untouched by the hours you spent below it. Around you, miners rise from the darkness like silhouettes rejoining the surface. Their faces are coated in dull grey, eyes squinting slightly against the outdoor light. Some adjust their coats, others secure the straps of their lamps, or shift the tools resting against their shoulders. The movements are subdued, shaped more by exhaustion than by any need to hurry or linger. The path back to camp lies ahead, a worn strip of ground bordered by piles of hardened snow and patches of exposed dirt. Every footstep lands in a place carved by countless others before it. Strips of ice glisten faintly along the edges, the surface etched with the marks of boots, sliding, slipping, rebalancing. You join the slow procession without needing direction. The path knows the route, even if your thoughts do not. As you walk, the wind presses against your coat, flattening the fabric to your body. The cold creeps through seams and into the small spaces between layers of clothing. You clutch the pick more tightly for a moment, then let your grip loosen as the weight drags against your arm. Your hand trembles slightly, a residual tremor from the hours of repetitive motion underground. The sensation persists with each step, a lingering echo of the work that never truly leaves your muscles. The landscape stretches out in muted tones, white, brown, grey, all softened by distance. The sky hangs low, its clouds thick enough to flatten the light into an indistinct haze. Every structure in the camp stands rigid and colourless, shaped by utility rather than any semblance of welcome. The fences form straight lines that divide the snow, their barbs traced with frost. Watchtowers punctuate the perimeter, their silhouettes unmoving against the horizon. You inhale again, the cold stinging your throat. The taste of dust still lingers, refusing to be displaced by the sharper air. It mixes with the scent of smoke, drifting from the cookhouse chimney, forming a blend of earth and ash that settles deep inside you. The air outside the mine feels wider, but not freer, just a different kind of confinement. Ahead, a man stumbles slightly on a patch of ice. He catches himself without comment, straightens, and continues walking. No one reacts. The path absorbs missteps as easily as it absorbs footprints, storing each moment with the same indifferent precision. The line continues, unbroken, shaped by the same requirement that brought you out of the shaft. You notice how the snow along the edges has formed small drifts, their surfaces hardened by wind. The drifts appear smooth, almost polished, as though the landscape has been erased and rewritten by the elements themselves. Your boots leave faint impressions that disappear within moments as the wind sweeps across them. Even your presence is temporary in the eyes of this place. The land does not pause to mark it. The path curves gently toward the row of barracks, their roofs coated in a thin crust of ice. Smoke curls from a few chimneys, drifting upward in narrow ribbons before dissolving into the wider cold. The sight should carry some sense of return, but it does not. The structures stand without sentiment, offering shelter without warmth, routine without comfort. Your arms grow heavier as you near the tool shed, the weight of the pick dragging downward with increasing insistence. When you hand it to the guard stationed at the door, he takes it without acknowledgement, inspecting it with the brief, efficient glance of someone who expects nothing more than functionality. The tool disappears into the rack with the others, indistinguishable, interchangeable, ready to be used again. Without the weight of the pick, your arm hangs loosely at your side. The cold seeps into the space where the handle once rested against your skin. You rub your palm along your coat, feeling the stiffness in your fingers. They respond slowly, curled slightly from the repetitive strain of the day. You flex them a few times, but the movement does little to relieve the tightness. You continue along the path, passing the mess hall, where faint light flickers behind the frosted windows. The smell of thin soup drifts through the cracks in the door, carried by the wind. It mixes with the scent of coal smoke, forming an aroma that is neither inviting nor repellent, simply present, like everything else here. Your breath grows heavier, forming small clouds that linger briefly before dissolving. Each exhale feels slightly warmer than the air around you, but the warmth disappears too quickly to matter. The cold presses into your chest, settling with the same quiet persistence as the dust that clings to your lungs. The barracks come into view, their wooden walls darkened by moisture, their doors hanging slightly crooked on worn hinges. You push the door open and step inside, the warm air brushing against your face with surprising gentleness. It does not linger. It does not soften anything. It simply fills the space between the walls, giving shape to the routine that waits here each evening. Your legs ache as you cross the room. Your hands still carry the faint vibration of the pick. Your lungs hold the residue of the shift. The camp absorbs your return without comment, recording your presence the same way it records every step on the frozen ground. Without interest, without memory, only as another small mark in a ledger that no one here will ever read. The door closes behind you with a soft thud that seems louder than it should in the heavy quiet of the barracks. The warmth inside is thin, almost symbolic, as though the room is designed only to prevent bodies from freezing rather than offer comfort. You wipe your boots against the worn floorboards, out of habit more than cleanliness. The mud and dust cling stubbornly to the grooves anyway. The lamplight hangs low, burning with the faint, stingy glow of fuel that has been stretched too far. You move toward the bunk that has come to accept your weight, the wooden frame creaking subtly as you settle onto its edge. The straw mattress shifts beneath you, redistributing itself unevenly, the dryness brushing against your hands as you adjust your coat. Dust rises from the fabric in small clouds, illuminated for a moment by the lamp before disappearing into the dimness overhead. The air carries that familiar mixture of sweat, earth, and stale breath, an aroma so constant that it has become a kind of background signature, the scent of survival defined by repetition. Around you, bodies drift into their evening routines without urgency. A man, near the far wall, rubs his hands together repeatedly, warming them through friction more than heat. Another sits with his elbows on his knees, staring at the ground as though reading something only he can see. A few murmur in low voices, their sentences clipped, each word spoken with the same economy that governs everything here. There is no space for idle conversation. Fatigue has trimmed thoughts down to essentials. You begin to unfasten the buttons of your coat, your fingers moving slowly, stiff from the cold outside and the strain of the day. Each button resists slightly, as though the fabric has hardened from sweat and dust. When the coat finally comes off, the air touches your shirt with a chill that makes you inhale through your teeth. You fold the coat and place it beside you, feeling the weight leave your shoulders, but not the tiredness buried beneath. Your hands rest on your knees, palms open, fingers still carrying the faint vibration of the tools you held for hours. The skin along your knuckles is cracked, dry, irritated from constant pressure. When you curl your hands gently, the joints protest with a dull stiffness that continues even when you attempt to relax. The fatigue is not a single sensation. It is layered, accumulated, filed away inside the body like documents in a drawer that never empties. Someone coughs, a rough, short sound that echoes against the walls. The air shifts as another person crosses the room, their footsteps slow, uneven. The barracks absorbs every noise without amplifying it, turning each sound into a faint reminder of movement rather than a break in the silence. You take a shallow breath, realizing how tired your lungs feel from the dust they carried throughout the day. The evening air is clearer, but the residue remains, lodged deep in places where breath struggles to reach. You lean back slightly, letting your spine rest against the cold wooden wall. The surface presses into your shoulder blades in a firm, unmoving line. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to allow the heaviness behind them to settle. The darkness behind your eyelids feels denser than the darkness of the mine. Less oppressive, perhaps, but no more comforting. Your thoughts drift in slow, sluggish currents, each one barely forming before dissolving again. Across the room, someone strikes a match to light a small candle. The flame flares briefly, then shrinks into a steady, narrow glow. Its light adds almost nothing to the space but creates the illusion of warmth. You watch it flicker, the flame bending as someone walks past it. The shadows stretch and contract in slow movements, giving the room an appearance of breathing, shallow, exhausted, resigned. Your stomach growls faintly, reacting to the thin meal you ate earlier. Hunger no longer arrives as a sharp demand. It presents itself as a low, persistent ache that blends into the fatigue. You shift your weight to ease the discomfort, though it offers only temporary relief. The barracks, with its rigid walls and rationed warmth, is not a place where the body recovers so much as pauses between tasks. A man across from you pulls a small cloth from his pocket and unwraps a piece of hard bread. He breaks it quietly, the crust snapping with a soft crack. He hands half to the person beside him without a word. The exchange is brief, practical, an understanding formed not through friendship, but through proximity and shared depletion. You watch the bread disappear into their mouths with slow, deliberate movements. You feel neither envy nor gratitude, only the distant awareness that such small gestures maintain the thin thread of cooperation necessary for the next day. Someone near the doorway adjusts the wick of another lamp, turning the flame down to conserve fuel. The light dims further, casting longer shadows along the floorboards. The barracks grows quieter, the edges of the room softening as the glow recedes. Darkness creeps in gradually, not as a threat, but as a reminder that the day has filed itself away, leaving only this narrow window of numb stillness. You stretch your legs out, feeling the tension pull along the muscles in your calves. The floor beneath your feet is rough, worn smooth in some places and splintered in others. The boards creak lightly when you shift your weight. You rub your thighs, trying to ease the tightness that has settled deep in the tissue. The pressure from your own hands offers minimal comfort, but it anchors you in the moment. Breath escapes your mouth in slow, foggy strands. Even indoors, the cold lingers in the air, refusing to soften entirely. You pull the thin blanket from your bunk and drape it over your lap. Its weight is light, its fabric coarse. The warmth it provides is functional, not soothing. You tuck it under your legs and arms, cocooning yourself just enough to trap a bit of heat. The quiet deepens further as more workers settle onto their bunks. The lamps dim to nearly nothing, leaving only the faint glow of a single flame near the far corner. The barracks becomes a room of silhouettes, bodies curled, slumped, bent in shapes moulded by exhaustion. You listen to the pattern of breathing around you, each inhale and exhale timed by fatigue rather than sleep. The sound creates a strange unity, a shared resignation carried on tired lungs. You lower yourself onto the mattress, shifting until the straw settles beneath you. The blanket slides over your shoulders, trapping the small pocket of warmth between your body and the air. You rest your head on the thin pillow, its stuffing uneven from long use. The wood of the bunk creaks under your movement, adjusting to your weight as if reacquainting itself. Your eyes fall half closed. The dimness softens further, blurring the outlines of the room until everything becomes a single, muted shape. The cold lingers, but your body has grown too tired to resist it. You focus on your breathing, each breath a small effort that fills your chest. With a mixture of fatigue and dust, your hands lie still beside you, palms open, fingers slightly curled. You do not feel rest approaching, only the slow dissolution of thought, the gradual fading of awareness. The hours before sleep settle into place like papers arranged neatly in a drawer, quiet, still, drained of anything but necessity. The barracks holds you without comfort, without warmth, without promise, only with the understanding that another day begins soon, filed under the same fatigue that shapes every evening here. The final traces of lamplight thin into a dull glow that barely touches the floorboards. The barracks has quieted into a long, steady hush, one shaped not by peace but by depletion. The last cough fades into the shadows. Boots stop shifting. Coats stop rustling. A collective stillness settles like dust over the rows of bunks, each body flattening into exhaustion, as though the walls themselves have instructed it. You lie with your head pressed lightly into the thin pillow, its shape uneven, the fabric stiff from cold and persistent use. The blanket clings weakly to your shoulders, trapping just enough warmth to dull the constant chill that lingers in the air. Your breath escapes in slow, shallow strands, forming a faint haze before dissolving into the dimness. Each inhale feels heavier than the last, not from effort but from the tiredness that has seeped into the small mechanics of your lungs. The barracks smells of earth, old wood, and the sweat of labour that never quite leaves the skin. These scents mix with the faint tang of iron, still clinging to your clothes, forming an odour that will outlast the night. You close your eyes, hoping for a brief moment of blankness, but the darkness behind your eyelids feels thick, not soothing. It presses inward with the same quiet authority as every rule that governs this place. Around you, the bunk frames creak under shifting bodies. A man on the lower bunk adjusts himself, the mattress sighing beneath his weight. Another turns to face the wall, his breath steady but shallow. These movements register as distant murmurs, small gestures filed neatly into the nighttime routine, neither disruptive nor comforting. Your limbs sink deeper into the mattress, the straw beneath you rustling faintly. The ache in your muscles lingers, dull and wide, settling into places untouched during the day. It is the kind of ache that feels permanent, yet never sharp enough to demand attention. Your arms rest beside you, palms open, fingers curled loosely, as though letting go of tools that still exist in your grip's memory. You feel the ghost of weight along your shoulders, the faint echo of vibration running through your hands from the hours spent striking rock. A draft slides through the small gaps in the wooden walls, brushing cold air across your cheek. The sensation is soft but insistent, like a reminder that even here, where stillness reigns, the outside world continues with indifferent regularity. The wind rattles weakly against the boards, a low, brittle sound that blends with the subtle shifts of breath inside the room. Your mind tries to reach for something outside the present moment, a memory, a thread of thought, a sense of self not defined by exhaustion, but the effort dissolves before it forms. Fatigue smooths everything into a single, muted line. There is no space for longing or hope, only the steady descent of awareness into the narrow channel that leads towards sleep. Someone exhales sharply, clearing their throat. Another mutters a few unintelligible words before falling silent again. The barracks absorbs each sound, dulling it until it fades into the general hum of bodies too tired to stay awake, yet too drained to fall fully asleep. You realize your own breathing has aligned with the slow rhythm around you, moving at the same pace as dozens of other chests, rising and falling in a synchronized motion carved by necessity. You turn slightly, the straw shifting beneath your weight. The movement draws a faint sting of discomfort along your spine, but you settle again, letting your body find the least painful position. The blanket slides across your arm, its coarse fabric catching slightly on your skin. You pull it back up, tucking it beneath your chin. The warmth it offers is thin, almost symbolic, but enough to shield you from the persistent cold that nips at exposed skin. The ceiling beams above you blur in the dimness, their outlines merging with the shadows. You stare at them for a moment, tracing their shape with tired eyes. The wood bears the marks of time, cracks, dark patches, edges softened by damp. The beams stand steady, indifferent, their purpose simple: hold up the roof, no more, no less. In their stillness, you sense a similarity to the routine that governs your own days. functional, impersonal, repetitive. Your breathing grows slower, the heaviness in your eyelids deepens, yet sleep does not arrive quickly. It circles, cautious, like something verifying whether you have adequately surrendered to it. Nights here are not restful. They are assigned, expected, measured, just like every other part of the day. Your body prepares itself not for restoration, but for temporary shutdown, as though it has learned that renewal is a luxury it cannot afford. Your lungs expand with a long, tired inhale. You hold the breath for a moment, then release. The faint noise of a falling ember from the last lamp reaches you. A small crackle, quickly swallowed by the dark. The flame sputters once, its glow tremoring before settling into a dim, steady flicker. Its light stretches thin across the boards, tracing faint patterns that resemble the cracks in old documents. The glow feels rationed, as though even light must obey the economy of this place. Your thoughts drift again, unfocused, drifting, in small, weightless fragments. They do not form memories or dreams, just impressions. The dull thud of rock, the heat of exertion mixing with the chill of underground air, the slow shoveling of dust that settles after every strike. These impressions float briefly, then sink, merging into the murky feeling of time without edges. Someone shifts their legs in a nearby bunk, the boards answering with a soft groan. Another person sighs, long and weary. These noises fold into the quiet, becoming part of the nighttime landscape. Less interruptions and more confirmations that others, too, are suspended in this tired stillness. Your eyes drift closed again. This time, the darkness feels heavier, settling over your mind with the weight of something procedural rather than peaceful. Sleep moves toward you like a slow tide, not offering escape, but enforcing another phase of the routine. Even in this softness, there is a sense of being observed, not by eyes, but by the requirements of the next day, the next shift, the next line in an unwritten schedule. Your breathing deepens another degree. Your limbs grow heavier. Your thoughts grow thinner. Sleep begins to pull you under, not gently, but steadily. No dreams rise to meet you. They have no space here. You drift into a darkness shaped not by rest, but by the necessity of continuing tomorrow. A darkness that feels handed to you like another form to be filled, another hour assigned, another pause before the mining resumes again. A brittle sound breaks through the darkness before your eyes open, the faint clatter of metal against metal, distant yet unmistakable. It travels across the barracks in a thin, unwavering line, slipping through the wooden walls as if it had always been inside the room. The noise settles onto you like a hand placed firmly on your shoulder, neither shaking nor dragging, simply expecting you to rise. Your eyelids lift slowly. The room remains dim, the lingering glow of early dawn filtering through gaps in the wooden boards. The light is colourless, quiet and without warmth. The silhouettes of bodies lie in rigid patterns, the outlines of blankets barely distinguishable in the muted haze. Breath forms shallow clouds above some mouths, drifting upward and dissolving before reaching the ceiling. Your limbs resist movement at first. They feel heavy, as though they have absorbed the weight of the night rather than recovered from it. You lie still for a moment, sensing the cold that has seeped into the mattress, into your clothes, into your bones. It is not a sharp cold, just a steady, familiar presence that makes it clear the day has begun, regardless of your readiness. You pull the blanket aside, and a thin draft immediately settles over your chest and arms. The air inside the barracks carries the residue of sleep, stale breath, sweat, the faint musk of bodies resting more from exhaustion than comfort. It mixes with the smell of damp wood and the soft whisper of frost clinging to the window frame. None of it wakes you fully. It only confirms that the narrow hours of unconsciousness have ended. You swing your legs over the side of the bunk. The floor's chill, seeps into the soles of your feet through thin socks, grounding you in a way that feels more like obligation than awareness. You sit hunched for a moment, elbows resting on your knees, gathering enough will to stand. The muscles in your back protest, the tendons in your shoulders tighten. You stretch your hands slightly, feeling the stiff pull along your knuckles. The skin is cracked where dust and cold have worn it thin. Around you, others begin to rise. Some do so slowly, as though afraid the motion will snap something within them. Others move with mechanical steadiness, bodies trained by repetition rather than will. A few remain curled for another moment, caught in the narrow space between waking and rising. But the sound of the bell, now closer and sharper, forces them forward. You stand and retrieve your coat from the hook by your bunk. The fabric feels stiff, almost brittle from the frost that crept into its fibres overnight. You lift it to your shoulders and slide your arms through the sleeves, the cold pressing against your skin with a familiar bite. The weight settles onto you, as though reminding you that yesterday did not end so much as it paused. You button the coat one notch at a time, fingers moving through the motions without conscious thought. Each button fastens with a muted scrape, the sound lost quickly in the growing noise of bodies preparing for the day. Someone coughs into their sleeve, a low rasp that lingers for a moment. Another person tightens the laces of their boots, the leather creaking as it adjusts to the shape of tired feet. When you step toward the door, the floorboards groan beneath your weight, responding as they have countless times. A guard pushes the door open from outside, allowing a blast of cold air to spill into the room. The temperature shift steals a shallow breath from your lungs, and your eyes narrow reflexively. The guard stands still, face expressionless, posture rigid with routine. You join the line moving out of the barracks. The cold air meets your face fully now, stinging your cheeks and pressing against your breath. The world outside appears unchanged, the sky a heavy sheet of pale grey, the ground crusted with frost that crunches beneath your boots, the structures arranged in the same rigid order that defines every morning. The camp seems motionless for a brief moment, as if waiting for the collective shift of bodies to animate it. Smoke rises from a few chimneys, thin and intermittent, curling upward before the wind scatters it. Footprints from previous days have frozen into shallow depressions, forming a textured path you follow without needing instruction. Your steps fall exactly where countless others have fallen, each mark layered upon the next, until the ground holds no individual imprint. You inhale deeply, and the cold penetrates your chest like a slow-moving weight. The dust from yesterday still clings faintly to your throat, making each breath feel slightly strained. The air carries a faint trace of coal smoke from the cookhouse, but there is no warmth in it, only the reminder that fuel burns somewhere out of sight, controlled, rationed, purposeful. The mess hall stands ahead, its windows fogged with condensation. Workers gather near the entrance, forming a line that moves with the unhurried pace of bodies too tired to rush. You join them, advancing step by step until you reach the doorway. The warm air inside brushes against your face with a dull intensity, but it disappears instantly beneath the cold embedded in your coat. A ladle dips into a pot, scraping along the bottom before rising with a scoop of thin porridge. The metal bowl handed to you feels warm for a fleeting second, then cools as soon as you grip it. You sit at one of the long wooden tables, the bench beneath you uneven and marked by years of use. You take your first spoonful, the porridge lukewarm, its taste almost non-existent. You swallow slowly, more out of necessity than appetite. Voices remain soft around you, barely audible exchanges about tasks, tools, or small interruptions in the previous day's work. No one discusses plans or hopes. Time here does not extend far enough to accommodate them. Each word is practical, shaped by awareness of ears that may be listening. When you finish your meal, you place the empty bowl in the designated bin. The line outside the mess hall has thinned, replaced by another line near the tool shed. You join it, stepping into the rigid order that governs every movement in this place. A guard hands out picks and shovels, each one showing the wear of countless shifts. When your turn arrives, the pick he gives you feels almost identical to the one you returned yesterday. Same weight, same texture, same indifferent durability. You grip the handle, feeling the wood press into the cracks along your palm, fitting itself into the curve of your fingers as though reclaiming a familiar place. The shovel follows, its blade dulled but functional. You sling both tools over your shoulder, adjusting their position until the weight balances evenly. The motion feels practiced, an almost ingrained reflex. The line begins its slow march toward the mine. Boots strike the frozen ground in steady rhythms. Breath rises in clouded puffs. The wind cuts across the path like a blade sharpened by routine. The mine looms ahead. Dark, open, waiting. Its entrance has not changed. Its timbers stand as they always have. The shadows inside hold the same depth, the same silence, the same promise of hours, unbroken by anything except labour. Your steps do not falter. Your breath does not quicken. Your thoughts do not attempt escape. You walk because the path demands it, because the morning requires it, because the schedule recognises only continuity. Your life here proceeds not in days or memories, but in identical units of effort, each one stamped, filed and forgotten by a system that keeps records but cannot recall names. You adjust your grip on the pick as the tunnel draws near, its darkness folding into the pale light like another document being placed in a drawer. And then you step forward, returning to the cycle that waits without pause, the cycle that shapes a life no one will remember, the cycle that continues because you do, one assigned breath at a time. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.